When it comes to a series where the main character's overpowered, very few actually portray it in a way that's entertaining. You have shows like the Bargain Bin Isekai in which power is just magically granted, then it's after that every conflict becomes extremely trivialized. Sure, the character's strong and there's plenty of flexing, but when everything else literally doesn't matter because of it, that's when a power fantasy starts to become boring in my opinion. Then we have shows like Eminence in Shadows, Slime, and Overlord, where despite the character being the strongest or pretty much close to the strongest, there's all these other events going on that make that power a secondary element. For Eminence in Shadow, it's Sid's oblivious influence on everything. For Slime, it's Rimuru people and their presence as an independent nation. Then for Overlord, it's Nazarick and their pursuit of world domination. All things that are assisted by the main protagonist's overwhelming power, but at the end of the day, it's really just this complementary tool used to assist in the building of the plot, world, and characters. So, while yes, being powerful is one of the defining traits of the series, it's certainly not the end-all be-all for it. And it's that defining aspect of a good power fantasy versus a bad power fantasy that I think Solo Leveling might do the best out of anyone. What is this Solo Leveling, you might ask? Well, that's what we're gonna talk about here. A series well known across the globe for how exciting it is that in only a few weeks we'll be premiering its anime. It's also the show I'll be covering every week on this channel come January. Now, I know Solo Leveling is right around the corner, but allow me to introduce you to some other system-based novels just like it. Just like how Sung Jin-woo used his to become overwhelmingly powerful, the protagonists of all these do exactly the same. So, where can you read all these amazing novels? Well, with today's sponsor being Webnovel, all you gotta do is download their app and search for System. Not only will you find similar stories like The Strongest System or God Rank Upgrade System, but all the best new isekai, fantasy, and everything in between can be found here with just the click of a button. Both novels and comics can be read seamlessly. As for the one I'm reading myself right now, I gotta recommend Reincarnated with The Strongest System. In a world where the MC makes the ultimate sacrifice for his family, the gods decide to reincarnate him with what's called, well, the Strongest System. It's a tool that helps him level up quickly and choose from multiple professions. Obviously that makes him overpowered, but it's not so much that makes this story captivating, but instead the way that he uses it to find happiness again. It's an emotional journey in which our MC tries to make a new life for himself. So, if you want to read that or any of the other System novels, then be sure to click the link in the description and download Webnovel today. After which, all you gotta do is just search for System. All the ones I've mentioned will be right at the top. But now, let's get back to the video. It was almost 10 years ago that Solo Leveling first made its appearance. What started out as an unpublished novel back in 2014 was later serialized onto the South Korean platform Kakao Page, then quickly into a webtoon only 2 years later. It had become this digital comic that would rapidly expand across the world. From Korea to Japan, then soon after North America, Solo Leveling had become this global phenomenon that would garner millions of readers daily. It had become one of, if not the most popular manhwa ever. Now, what is it that makes Solo Leveling so popular? Well, I don't think it's because it's a literary masterpiece that's perfect in every aspect, but what I do think is that it delivers on exactly what it sets out to do. We go in expecting the story of a guy who becomes stronger solo, and what we're given in return is a plot that progresses like butter, characters both relatable and understandable, then art that's some of the best I've ever seen in any medium. Combine this with an underdog story that has you rooting heavily for the protagonist, and what you get are the core ingredients to make just about any story successful. It's when we start looking at Solo Leveling through the lens of what makes it a power fantasy though, that's when we get to the elements that really make it shine. The progression of power is slow and methodic, the pacing quick and action intense, then the scale of conflict grows with respect to the level of power that the main character is at. It's like this exponential ramp in which you think he's reached his peak, then out of nowhere someone or something appears to prove otherwise. That's not to say those things are random or make no sense though, because the way one conflict flows into the next is actually quite smooth and fairly captivating. The story wastes no time going from, say, a dungeon to a raid, and even hints at potential upcoming conflicts while doing so. Each instance becomes more dangerous than the last, and it's as they happen that the main character becomes more powerful through them. So there's no point where our protagonist has suddenly become the strongest, because it's when you think he does that a new challenge arises to show that he hasn't. This is probably Solo Leveling's most enjoyable aspect as a whole, but it's before I touch more on how it's done that I think you should first know about the story now. I've said enough about why I think it's good in general, but it's about time we delve into some of the themes and concepts we're dealing with. So, unlike most power fantasies I'm sure we're familiar with, this is neither an isekai nor a medieval fantasy, but instead just the modern world with fantasy video game elements intertwined into it. Think dungeon-based encounters from Diablo, boss fights as intense and menacing as in Dark Souls, then a guild system as comprehensive as Final Fantasy XIV's. Top it all off with a billion-dollar global industry built around it like it's EVE Online, and that's pretty much solo leveling. So, it was about 10 years ago that portals known as gates would start appearing in the real world. These gates would connect to what's known as dungeons, and these dungeons would be areas of another dimension typically containing hordes of monsters and a major boss leading them. They were pockets of chaos that would only close once that major boss was defeated. If it wasn't, then after 7 days the dungeon would break and the monsters within would be set free into the real world. It's a simple concept in which the stakes are set right from the get-go. Clear the dungeons or let literal demons massacre civilians. Luckily, humans weren't left unequipped to deal with these dungeons because right around the time that they started appearing, so too did the existence of humans with powers. Magic, which wasn't thought to have existed before, suddenly started empowering people to the point that they could slay these monsters and demons. These people would soon become known as hunters, and depending on the level of power they were gifted with, a rank from E to S would be granted to indicate it. E of course being the weakest, and S being this catch-all for those whose power can't even be measured anymore. So, naturally our protagonist starts off at the E rank, but he's not just the weakest in terms of classification, he's quite literally the weakest hunter ever. So much so that you couldn't even consider him very much stronger than a normal person. The reason he still risks his life anyway is because his mother is sick and he needs the money to pay her medical bills. So, to him he has no choice but to do these raids. It's when he's on one that turns out to be harder than expected that both him and his party get wiped because of it. A double layer extending the dungeon beyond what it was thought to be takes him right to Anor Londo where Smaug and Ornstein are waiting for him. The fight goes just about as well as mine did, and it's right as the finishing blow is about to be delivered that a secret quest would reveal itself as completed, somehow saving Sung Jin-woo from his imminent demise and at the same time bringing him into the system which now allows him to level. Everything after seems like it's totally normal again, but it's this ability to level up that changes everything. Reason being that hunters aren't supposed to be able to get stronger. Once their power is gained, there's nothing more that can be done to change it. So, for Sung Jin-woo to be able to complete quests and subsequently gain XP, skills, and rewards, well, that's an ability that makes him quite the anomaly, eventually attracting the attention of guilds across the world and so on and so forth as he continually makes himself stronger. Now, leveling to become stronger definitely isn't a concept that we've never seen before, but what I think separates it from all the others is that slow, methodical grind in which Sung Jin-woo becomes more powerful. He doesn't just magically become OP off-screen or through some brief montage of training, but is instead constantly growing with each quest he completes and every boss he defeats. We become personally invested in his growth as a character and are constantly anticipating what new heights he's gonna achieve next. The suspense doesn't just stop with that though, because this intriguing world of guilds and hunters brings with it a diverse cast of characters you can either root for or really despise a lot, both of which lead to these situations in which Sung Jin-woo can unveil his power in the most spectacular way possible. These characters certainly aren't developed to the same level Sung Jin-woo is at, but if you've ever watched my videos on flexes and isekai before, you'd know I'm a sucker for those moments when the protagonist showcases their power to those who underestimate him. And with solo leveling, there's that in spades. It never seems to get repetitive though, because the situations in which they happen are all different enough to the point that they feel unique and warranted. They're these climactic peaks that you know the story is leading to, but still can't wait to see due to how gratifying they are. I won't spoil any of the situations in which they happen, but trust me when I say that they're some of the most satisfying flexes you'll ever have the pleasure of experiencing, a lot of which I'm excited to see finally get animated. I don't know if it's because of the slow grind he's taken that's led him up to this point, but there's no doubt that when he finally gets there, you'll know he's earned it because you've seen him work his ass off to do so. So that's more of a point that I'm personally fond of, but if you're someone who's more into world building and the overall plot, I think you'll find the development of the world just as exciting. We probably won't see too much of it in season 1 of the anime, but as the stakes get higher and Sung Jin-woo gets stronger, so too does the involvement of people and organizations from across the world. What starts off as a story isolated to Korea quickly expands into this global affair involving guilds and hunters worldwide. I know sometimes that can make the plot convoluted or hard to follow, but here it actually serves as a way to ensure Sung Jin-woo's power scaling is balanced. What I mean is that every time we think Sung Jin-woo has reached his peak, someone or something is introduced to raise the bar higher, bringing us back to that point that I'd mentioned earlier. There will always be a new target propelling him forward. He just completed a difficult raid? Cool, here's an even harder red gate with even stronger monsters. You just beat that? Nice, now you've got the attention of nation-level hunters. It's this constant expansion of the world around him, all of which is a direct result of the effort he's put in. It's almost like you yourself are unlocking parts of the world while reading, since you're pretty much with Sung Jin-woo every step of the leveling process. Now, I haven't even gotten started on Sung Jin-woo's epic powers, but that's something I feel you should discover for yourself in the anime. I could also praise the amazing art solo leveling is drawn with, but I'm sure the clips I've used here are more than enough to get my points across. So, what I'll talk about instead is what you could potentially expect from the anime coming out in January. Personally, my dream was for Ufotable to give this the animation it deserves, but I think A1 Pictures and Aniplex might be just as capable. Sure, we might not get animation as fluid as Demon Slayer or Fate, but I've never complained about the quality of SAO either. Combine this with a soundtrack done by the legendary Hiroyuki Sawano, and already that's two core components we know are going to be handled well. Where I do have a bit of hesitation though, is the speed at which they're going to adapt the story. Remember, the fast pacing is something I mentioned Solo Leveling does well in the manhwa, but I fear the condensed nature of anime might make that a little bit too quick. With the director and series compositor without notable anime for either position, it's hard to say how it is they may choose to adapt this since there aren't really any anime we can compare it to. The most I can do to figure out how the pacing may be is look at the scenes that we were shown in the trailers. There's a few characters here who don't show up till much later, so either Solo Leveling is getting a multi-core season, or we might actually be condensing the story even more than the webcomic does. Either way, I'm just super excited to see my favorite manhwa finally become an anime, and it's a show I'll be covering weekly regardless of how good or bad it is. I'm honestly just happy to watch my all-time favorite power fantasy. I'm sure plenty of you have read this as well, but if you haven't and are waiting for the anime, trust me when I say that you're in for a treat. This is honestly an isekai fanatic's fantasy. It may not be an isekai itself, but the tropes it borrows from the whole OP protagonist thing are executed both perfectly and repeatedly. So yeah, that's the rundown on what Solo Leveling is. I hope you're all just as excited as I am, and I hope to see you back here again when I make my future videos on it. If you're new, then consider subscribing to know exactly when those videos come out. Not only will I do cut content explaining the differences between the webcomic and anime, but I'll also do power and lore videos too. More comprehensive ones which will take details from the web novels. If any of that sounds interesting, then be sure to leave a like and let me know in the comments. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!